Timmy K here, Metal Voice. Look at this. The Metal Voice shirts are now on sale. Just go to the video description to find out on how you can purchase one. Metal! In these crazy times, you need a Metal Voice hat. You can pick it up at metalvoice.com. Welcome back once again to the Metal Voice, Rick Emmett.
Yeah.
Solo artist. Part of the legacy of Triumph.
Yes.
It's a yearly event.
Yearly event.
Well, it'll be, if I get out a book a year, yes. But, you know, other than that, I might take a holiday. But, yes, I'll try and see you every year.
So Rick's here to explain us all about Telecasteritis and in 10 tales.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. Funny enough, Rick, I want to tell you something. Last time you were on, we were on a cliffhanger. You said, I got this book in my head, and I'm thinking this working title, The 10 Telecaster Tales. And maybe I'll have some music to accompany this as I tell the tales. You're actually alluding to this book. That
I was. Yeah. I've written the music, and you know, I mean, I've been in this game a long time, and when you're coming up with an album, of course, we live in times where, you know, an album is not necessarily, it doesn't mean what it used to mean. So, you know, and I just saw a thing the other day where somebody was like, well, you got to release a single every week and then you put out your album at the end. But, you know, you should have at least 6 singles before you put out an album. I'm going, it's just like when I was a kid and they would sell singles at the, you know, the local department store. And all the kids would run down and be buying 45s. Anyways, all of that aside, I'm making a record and I'm thinking, well, you have to do liner notes. And then the idea of liner notes started to expand. And I was thinking, well, I think what I'm going to do is write the most comprehensive set of liner notes for an album that I've ever undertaken. So that's what it is.
But that's what I took away. It's like, does Rick have too much time on his hands? I mean, we got 10 songs, averaging around maybe 3 minutes, let's say, and we got a 200-page book out of this. It's like,
yes. And now, and I do have too much time on my hands because I don't tour anymore, so I don't go out and play gigs. Although now that I've done this, and the book seems to be getting a nice little bump on its way out, you know, like as it's just coming out. So now I'm going to play some shows. And I put up a couple of shows for sale, and they sold out like in 24 hours.
Well, that's not.
Geez, you know, maybe I don't think I want to tour ever again. But it does. It's nice to have a new lease on life coming through something that's a little unusual. Like there's no singing on the record; it's all instrumental, solo, fingerstyle stuff. So you know, those of your viewers that are tuning in, hoping for something metallic. It is on steel strings, I can tell you that. But
so are you looking more for an evening with Rick Emmett, one-offs here and there? You sit down, a little chit-chat, you play some guitar, a little chit-chat. Is that something that you're more interested in today?
Exactly, yes. And I'm doing one with a friend of mine named Brent Jensen, who's a podcaster guy in Collingwood, Ontario, March 21st. But then the 2 shows that I'm going to do on April 10 and 11 in Toronto, the ones that are already sold out at the Redwood Theatre, that's more so that fans of mine can get a chance to hear I'm going to do a set by myself as the first set, all of the 10 Telecaster tales in order. And then I'm going to get my pal Dave Dunlop that I used to tour with a lot in the duo. And he and I will do the second set. And I'll play a couple of Triumph songs and stuff. But no, I'm not looking to burn myself out. I am looking to sort of have fun. And of course, you know, in the last few years, I've been doing a lot of these kind of podcast things. And so, you know, in a way, it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like you're doing a podcast, but you're going to have your guitar and you're going to have done a sound check. And, you know, you can...
Just brainstorming here. Maybe in Montreal, we can do a Metal Voice Presents an evening with Rick Emmett. Just a little chit-chat.
Oh, you guys would like that, wouldn't you? There's a promoter in Montreal, a lady named Kim Zimmer, and she's got a company called Get It Productions or something. And years ago, I used to do Rick Emmett. We used to call them, what do we call them now? Network shows, because folks that were fans belonged to the Rick Emmett network. And she promoted, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years of shows there. You know, just like visiting you guys once a year. I used to go and visit Montreal, and she would. Now there was it was called Lion d'Or, I think was the name of this club that I did at least 2 or 3 nights there, and it was great. It was, she was a great promoter, and the shows were a lot of fun. Small ensembles. I think maybe I took a band there once, but it was mostly duo or trio or something. So yeah, she sort of contacted me recently and said, "Hey, you want to come to Montreal?" I said, "Well, if I come, Kim, I would do a show with you if I come, but I, can I tell you what is in my near future?
Sure.
I'm not going to Montreal. I'm going to Paris.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So my wife and I are going, and we're going to have springtime in Paris, like middle of April, 5 days there, and then we're going to take a train up to Amsterdam. Then we're going to get on a cruise, a river cruise with like 3 other couples that are friends of ours, and we're going to go all the way down to Switzerland, and we're going to take our time, and I'm going to spend all of my ill-gotten gains.
And then you're going to come to Montreal.
Well, let's see if I survive that, gentlemen.
So we got singer, songwriter, author, columnist, teacher, and now guitar designer. You want to show us Babs like butter,
Yeah, yes, she is like butter. Yes, she is. And as you can see, it's a very Telecaster style looking guitar, but it's got a Gibson scale length. Like this is a sort of a Les Paul's kind of bridge, couple of humbucking pickups. So and it's a scale length. It's a Gibson scale length, 24 3/4. So I was combining a lot of things, and this is extremely light. This has been chambered out, so it's about 7 pounds, and but because I got these gigs coming up, I've been practicing every day, a couple hours, and running the set, and so this thing is starting to feel like second nature to me. Sometimes I feel more comfortable when I should go to sleep now.
Well, speaking of that, apparently with your first Telecaster, that's what you did, right? And
yeah, it was a standard thing in those days. Like the rumors would fly around that, hey, guys like Jimi Hendrix, you slept with your guitar, and it wasn't unusual as a teenager to be quietly practicing without plugging into your amp in your bedroom, and then you'd start falling asleep, and the next thing you know, you wake up and you got this guitar across your neck, and you're going, "Oh yeah, I guess I passed out there."
It was a good night. It was a good night.
How much would that first guitar be worth today, Rick?
Yeah, well, it wasn't an incredibly rare one. I can tell you, I bought it at Long McQuaid in Toronto, which was around Young and Bloor at the time, and I bought a little Fender amp at the same time because I got my union card and I was going to start playing weddings and bar mitzvahs and stuff. And I think probably I paid $250 for the guitar and a couple of $100 for the amp. So with tax and everything, it was probably $500 all in with a cable. And that was the beginning. But it was probably about I'm going to guess, a 68 or a 69 or a 70 Tele. It was in and around 71 or 72 when I bought it. So, yeah. And then I started flipping guitars like crazy, traded in on something else and I had a big honking old jazz box for a while. And I had a Strat, like Richie Blackmore was one of my guys, right? Like loved Blackmore. So I had a white Strat, So
I was reading the Randy Bachman book recently, and he had a huge collection of Gretsch guitars, but he had to stop playing just for the weight. And this guitar only weighs 7 pounds, correct?
Yeah, and I don't think Gretsch's don't strike me as being all that heavy, but Les Pauls were nuts. And of course, I was playing double necks for a lot of time in Triumph, and I had an Ibanez in particular from about 1979 to about 84. And it was like wearing a piano around you. It was like I've got a Cadillac strapped to my neck. It was heavy. It was an incredibly great guitar. It stayed in tune and it sounded great. But man, it was killing my back and my neck. Now that I'm old, that's why I'm sitting here and
The guitars are light, the couches are comfy.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing. Like in the 70s, all these double necks. That was the era of double necks, wasn't it? It was like, but you see less of that today. You just,
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, of course, because of digital technology, you can have pedals on the floor that can do anything you want. You can make it sound like any type of guitar. You can change the tone infinitely. So back in those days, you really kind of needed to switch guitars in order to get that source sound to be very different. And of course, the role models at the time, you mentioned double necks. Of course, Alex Lifeson and Rush. The first one I saw was maybe Steve Howe in Yes.
yes, yeah.
John McLaughlin, like he had a couple of double necks that were, you know, crazy beautiful guitars. So, yeah, you know, I mean, obviously the guys in Genesis had them. A lot of the prog guys would have them.
You were saying that guitar playing is really a three-way marriage, emotional, physical, and intellectual layers. Is it possible that you know, one is more predominant for certain players, or they need to be all equally?
That's a good question. I think there are some guitarists who, you know, favor certain things at certain times. It depends on repertoire, right? Like whatever you've come up with, whatever idea you've got, it's kind of driving the boat, you know, and you're going to have to go where the idea is taking you. And sometimes it's an intellectual one. Sometimes you're trying to show off. It's more of a technical, physical kind of thing. And obviously, depending on the style of music, I mean, you guys, you know, metal has always been something where you're sort of trying to prove your chops, you know, especially for the guitar players and everybody, bass players, drummers, singers, everybody's trying to go, look what I can do. You know, like there's a lot of that. But of course, I think, you know, metal music, prog kind of styles of music, they were nice balances of emotional, technical, and intellectual, because lyrics were often about something, you know, they weren't just standard sort of pop songs. Hey, I love you. Hey, let's, you know, hey, can we get laid? Hey, can we get drunk? You know, all these kinds of things that are pop songs. Like, I think there's an intellectual quality to, you know, when guys put together a band and then say, okay, you know, like imagine the Dream Theater egos, like, you know, when they're in a rehearsal, like just imagine what's going on there, because there's a lot of intellectual, technical stuff going on. And emotionally, you know, I think that, let me say this. One of my favorite guitar players is Pat Metheny. And I think Pat Metheny is a guy whose music is emotionally extremely highly developed. And I don't think a lot of guitar players work on that level. Pat does. And it's one of the reasons why almost universally guitar players admire him, because physically and intellectually, of course, he's got that. You know, but emotionally, man, he really figures out how to push buttons so that his music really comes alive. I can remember once being at a Metheny show and there was a woman, you know, 3 seats down in my row, and she was crying like a baby during one of the songs. And it was, you know, I mean, it moved me, but I wasn't crying, you know. Well, I might have been crying because I'll never be this good.
You know, I want to touch on that in a second about people crying over your music, but when I'm okay, so there's 10 tales here, right? And you've named the tales, and one of the tales is swirling, and now to go to what you were saying, you know, Ritchie Blackmore, and then came Randy Rhoads, and when you listen to swirling, there's a sort of maybe a neoclassical D, if you've heard D off the first the Blizzard of Oz.
Yeah.
Randy's not only a metal guy-ish, but now he's like sort of one of the first, I would say, 80s guitarists to jump into that sort of classical world. And yes. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Randy Rhoads, and what he gave and how it fits into swirling in a sense.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, we once did a gig in Port Vale in England. And Ozzy's band, it was supposed to be Motorhead and Sabbath as the two headliners. And we were up the bill. Frank Marino was on that.
Oh, wow.
And one of the Sabbath guys got sick and he couldn't play the gig. So they, at the last minute, the promoters kind of brought Ozzy in, and he had been touring. So his band, and it was Rudy Sarzo on bass, Tommy Aldridge on drums, and Randy on guitar. And it was one of the best rock bands. They were so tight because they'd been out playing a bunch of shows, and they were just like locked in. And Randy Rhoads was one of the finest guitar players I'd ever seen, in that league with an Eddie Van Halen kind of ability, and even maybe a little more schooled than that, a little bit more disciplined in his approach. So I expected, after seeing that show, I thought, this guy is going to become like a tour de force. And unfortunately, we lost him after that too soon.
Was that a festival?
Yeah, well, it was a bunch of headbangers in a soccer stadium, 30,000 guys. I don't know how many there were. It just seemed like a lot. Tommy Aldridge is a monster.
Yeah,
and he still is. I was talking to somebody about a week ago, and they said, "Oh no, Tommy, he's still bringing it. He's like 70 something now, and he still brings it." And of course, Tommy, I don't know if you guys have heard the stories, but he kind of had to road manage when Sharon wasn't around. Tommy had to kind of be the guy to take care of him, and the stories that Tommy can tell, oh my God, like. And because he was the responsible. Well, Randy was very responsible too. Like, he was not a party kind of guy. He was take his guitar back to the hotel room and practice classical guitar and go and get guitar lessons when he was on the road. Like, he would have become a real force. Anyways, it's not like I was consciously channeling Randy, but he and I have very similar. We grew up at the same time. Our influences he was California, of course, and here I was up in Canada. So he had a little bit more of that hard rock heavy thing. Yeah. Here in Canada, we were a little bit more progressive than that. It wasn't as heavy around here. We had like Genesis and Yes and those Pink Floyd. I think there was a little bit more of a progressive mentality here than there might have been out in California, where there was some hearty partying going on.
Flashy, we'll say.
Yeah. And they were heading towards that thing too of like hair bands and Motley Crue and, that sort of thing. And of course, Randy had been in Quiet Riot. So there was that whole thing of, Carlos Cavazo and the dudes from that band, which is, I think that was Rudy came into Ozzy's band because of the Quiet Riot connection. Anyways, off topic. The topic was, Swirly. My song, Swirly. That started from the feeling of a waltz, like a 6/8 buff, baboo, ding, da doo da. And it was feeling like a flowing, dancing kind of thing. But then very quickly, I started to think about the flowing of a river. It felt like a flowing current, and I wanted to keep that flowing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 and 2, like that feeling. Now, you said classical, and that's true. Something like that, and the forms and the structures that I write, they do tend to have that kind of, once you're building dance kinds of things, and I had been commissioned to write a bourrée for a film. Based on the very same tempo that, remember Jeff Rotal had a thing on the Stand Up album that was a Bach bourrée, and they'd cut this film together using that piece, and then they couldn't afford the licensing, and they said, "Hey, for a couple of grand, can you rescue us here? Could you write something the same tempo that would be like a bourrée dancing?" And that got me thinking about dance suites and 17th and 18th century France and Germany and all the courts where there were lute suites that were written where there would be a minuet, a bourrée, a chaconne, all these things. So you know, I started thinking like that, and then yes, I'm starting to write classical kinds of things.
You know, you mentioned in the book that the Telecaster is like an honest instrument, right? It doesn't do anything unless you do something. You want to elaborate on that?
Well, they're very plain guitars, and the pickups are very clean and bright and thin. So you got to work to get that thing to, you know, if you want big, beefy, meaty tone, you got to really play it hard, you know, to make it happen. Now, I mean, having said that, um, the honesty of the guitar is that because it's not a necessarily easy thing to play, you got to dig in. But it was the very first electric guitar that ever showed up, you know, really production wise. Gibson had their Les Paul soon after, solid body guitars, but the Tele was kind of the first, and because it became so popular, um, especially country guys and guys that played on TV, like the guy that played in Ozzie and Harriet in the band that, you know, behind Ricky Nelson.
Yeah.
Like those guys were all playing these guitars. They were on Motown records. The Tele was sort of everywhere. And I'm not going to. Oh, I think it was
James Burton. Is that James Burton you're talking about?
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah, James Burton. Yeah, he was the guy. And there was a guy named Mark Ribot that said, you know, it was a guitar that actually, in the American culture, it crossed over from black to white. And it became the guitar that, you know, the guy in James Brown's band used it, and the guys in the Motown band used it. But here were all these white country guys playing it on, you know. I saw a clip the other day, and it was Chet Atkins and Jerry Reed on Hee Haw, and they're both playing Teles, and I'm going. See, so that's the thing about the guitar; it can sort of do everything. Mm-hmm. Because it's so clean, spanky clean and good. Of course, I cheated, you know. I put humbuckers in there, and I made it a shorter scale length so it'll be a little easier to play.
You know, what I should tell everybody is, and I don't know if we kind of like said it, the 10 Tales is sort of like your personality and sort of your musical, the encyclopedia of Rick Emmett, because you could hear pieces and
yeah.
And you're halfway through the book. You're only halfway through the book when you start writing about that.
And I guess what I want to say is like I think it's Slinky Blues, right? It's Slinky's, which if you think of Hendrix, then you kind of it fits with Slinky. That song. Maybe I'm wrong about it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Hendrix was a pretty accomplished player, so. You know, but that kind of R&B playing it's informing almost all of the stuff. Now, not all of it, but I would say a good 7 or 8 of the tunes, they're very R&B based because that's where I came from on a Telecaster, and that's what Telecasters do so well. You know, that kind of greasy, slidey Jimmy Nolan, who, you know, Curtis Mayfield, the guys that influenced Hendrix. That stuff. And when I was a kid in my neighborhood, there was Dominic Troiano, and Robbie Robertson had been his precursor, who ended up in the band. But they were Tele guys, you know. And Robertson took his Tele thing, and off he goes. And eventually, he's playing in the band, and he's behind Dylan. He's playing Tele, you know, like. So the Tele moved from style to style, but it always had that R&B kind of quality. Now, Slinky, that's a thing where there's a jazzy component, but when I was writing it, I started, and you know, again, the thing about a Tele is when you plug it into a clean amp, but then you put an effect on it, a phase shifter or a chorus pedal, and in this case, I had tremolo going, and I was thinking, ooh, this sounds really great. It's a really cool sound. And I'd never really done just a solo record where I had leaned on the idea of, okay, develop the piece to a certain point and then figure out what kinds of effects you're going to use to make it happen. And in Slinky's case, it was like this tremolo thing that's just this wah, 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 like Fender Rhoads. You know the Jeff Beck Blow by Blow album where Max Middleton plays those keys, those Fender Rhoads, and it's stereo. It's got this young thing that's happening. And I went, that's what I want. I want that happening.
little known fact, Rick. I was reading. You brought up Roy Buchanan in the book. He actually was in the Hawks with Ronnie Hawkins just before Robbie joined.
Yeah, not for long.
Not for long.
I think he sat in for a couple of nights, kind of thing. And then, yeah, I mean, there's many stories there, obviously, but yeah, and Roy, I mean, at one point, I think Roy got invited to be in the Stones, and I think he turned him down, and I think part of the reason was maybe because he thought, I can't keep up. I can't keep up with those guys. I got enough of my own problems. I don't need to take on some of the issues that those guys have got too.
I heard that they auditioned Rory Gallagher, but he didn't never realize there was an audition, so he just left.
Yeah. Well, I guess I think for a while the Stones was kind of like this, like a club, like a we're going to invite all these guitar players, and maybe somebody will stick. Like I'm sure Mick Taylor knew he was in until somebody probably said to him, "So rehearsal on Thursday," and he went, "What? I'm in the band?"
Yeah, I didn't get the memo.
Yeah. I don't think there were a lot of memos being written in those days. I could be wrong. Maybe Mick was, as much of a straightforward kind of businessman as we would imagine he might be, with a degree from the London School of Economics. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Let me ask you this: you had the documentary. You came out with your book. Is there more of a demand for Triumph now than ever?
Well, I mean, geez, that's a lovely thing for you to say. I don't think more than ever, but I do think that there's a very lovely awareness that exists on a level that, 45, 50 years after the fact, who would have ever expected it? I mean, I got there's this thing called the Coalition for Music Education in Canada. And these folks, music educators all across the country, they pick a song to be sort of their national song for the year. And they picked Hold On, from the Just a Game album of 1979. And you kind of go, wow, that's great. So, I mean, I re-recorded a new version of it and they're doing overdubs on it as we speak. They get people to write string arrangements for school orchestras and bands and choir arrangements. And so the woman who's the executive director, Stacy Sinclair, she sent me this link. I got to see this choir in Chatham, Ontario, of like kids in grade 2 and 3 and 4, and they're all singing my song. And it just blows my mind, that such a beautiful thing can happen while I'm still around to enjoy it. Like it's a cool thing. So
and that's the crying. In parenthesis, that was the crying. Somebody was crying to someone else's song, but there are people who are crying to your music. I wanted to get back to that. I just forgot. So, but go ahead.
No, that's very good. You did reincorporation.
I took notes.
So we might be hearing somebody's out there for ADT home alarm systems or something, maybe.
Yeah. Well, you never know. If somebody asked me, I would consider it.
So do you think that the demand is sort of like, I guess it's a reboot for Triumph, right? It's another generation who's curious about the band.
Yeah, and certainly I think that there are things about what Triumph was that makes it so that it can still have validity now for people. Like it's some of it, not all of it, but some of it has aged very well. And especially given, the crap that we're having to go through now in terms of politics and the COVID things we've gone through and isolation and mental health and stuff. Music is something that has always had a therapeutic value, a spiritual value. And I don't care what kind of music. Like I would say metal might be a type of music that has more of that value than maybe other stuff. The more it gets towards pure pop, the less interesting I find it,
Yeah.
and it was always true. In Triumph, I was always trying to say, how do we reach those people in the seats? And how can I talk straight at them? I don't want to be, lecturing at them or hectoring them. And I don't think, oh my God, I must try to find a way to reach the commercial market. It was like, well, no, I'm a musician and I'm going to do what I do to satisfy myself. And I was in a band with a couple of guys that were pretty strong-headed, strong-willed. They were, they knew what they wanted to do and how they were going to try to do it. So, but I do think that, we picked this name Triumph. It was supposed to be about, the spirit of reaching those people and giving them something that mattered, a soundtrack for their lives. Not every song, but every album there had to be songs that tried to do that.
Put a check. That's a big checklist. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, well, yes, and I don't want to. You do interviews and it's pretty easy for you to say something stupid that can come back to bite you. And I also don't like to come off like I'm bragging or that I'm full of myself, because I do think that as an artist, as a musician, you do have to have a humility. There has to be a modesty all the time, like, because what you're chasing is an infinite thing. So you can't get so full of yourself that you're going, that's right, I can cocky. Now, of course, I did. Somebody sent me a clip today, and it was like, a thing that we'd done in 1987. And I wrote him back and I said, the cocky vanity of youth. And he said, oh, yeah, but when else are you going to have it?
Yeah, exactly.
When you're 71, there's not much cocky vanity left.
You always surprise me because in the first, and Lay It on the Line, you were quoting McLuhan and Bertrand Russell. This time it's Shelley and Coleridge. And actually, even Patrick Stewart, right? He's, to paraphrase, he always wanted to give the same performance every night, almost perfection. But then he's robbing the audience of a unique experience. What percentage of your playing live would vary, and you gave yourself that permission to do something a little bit different than the recorded song?
I would say, for me, it's usually maybe around a 70-30. Like 70 of it, you gotta, there's a script and you've got to follow it. And, people come and they want to hear the song the way they're used to hearing it. They will allow you a certain amount of latitude, and I think some folks come because they're hoping the musician is going to take some chances or the artist is going to take chances. And a guy like David Bowie would say, you're not in the right place if you've got both feet in the water and you're standing on the bottom. And he goes, no, you got to get in over your head a little bit so that there's a little bit of danger here. That's when you can really do some interesting things. And that's a very true kind of a thing that as an artist, you have to try to challenge yourself. And so that I always liked sections of the music where I would say, here's where we're going to go off on a tangent, boys. We're going to jam for the next 3 or 4 minutes, and see what happens. Now the Triumph guys, they had a different feeling about that. They didn't mind if it was like, okay, Rick, you're going to blow and we're just going to hold it down. And I would go, no, we got to interact. So I would kick their ass and say, this has got to go somewhere. And you got to participate to make it go somewhere. Else it's not really jamming. It's just, me out there, masturbating. and, while you guys are having a nice little holiday. That's no good, So anyhow.
You come across as a sincere artist and musician, and you are. I shouldn't say you come across, but today, as everybody's aging, everybody's using these backtracks, everybody's faking, lip syncing. I mean, in rock and roll metal, we're saying, like, we're even prog rock. I mean, how does that make you feel? Does it make you cringe to be? You seem like a true artist, and for myself, it kind of makes me cringe a bit. That people accept it, and the audience just accept it, and sometimes the audience knows about it and they accept it as well.
Yeah, well, here, I mean, I think I've become a little bit more of a realist about the digital universe that we are now inhabiting, and I do think that there are certain circumstances, like when the Rick Emmett band first started touring, I had the keyboard player have some samples for background
Yeah, but
vocals.
that's okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like of course now what happens, like we just watched the Oscars last night, and some of those performances, like I won't say who, but some people were lip syncing, some people were singing live, and other people were not. And that's perfectly okay with me because I understand about showbiz. I understand about you're in a production, there's dancers and they're swirling all around, and you're going to be out of breath because you were running around. And now you got to sing the third verse. Hit that mark, and those certain likes are coming on, and you want it to be excellent. So if you pre record and you lip sync, it's going to sound excellent. And so I go, okay, I see why it's done. It's done for a show business reason. It's not done for an artistic reason, except, from the idea of live theater. But, the point you made earlier about Patrick Stewart realizing that being in a play was a chance to do something in the moment. And I do think that that's what you're feeling bad about, that's what makes you cringe. That if it starts to feel like it's not live in this moment and that something good could happen, something bad could happen, that's
But
possible.
that's the beauty.
Without
That's
a
the
net.
beauty of live, right? Something bad can
Exactly.
happen, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes the bad stuff is what makes things great, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like a sort of production like the Oscars or the Grammys where people accept it because it is it is a production, and you don't want to screw
Yeah.
up, when 10 million people are watching. I'm talking about you're on tour, show after show, night after night. People pay good money to go see a show, and I think people accept, the keyboards or the sound effects and the soundscape stuff. But when the whole production is, I'm going to go see a live band, but they're not actually live.
Is it
That's
live or
what
is it
makes me
memory?
cringe. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. No, that for sure. But I mean, like, this is an interesting thing to have a conversation about. I'm going to try to paint a picture between, oh God, Trans Siberian Orchestra on one side and John Fogerty over on the other. Okay.
Okay.
So, Trans Siberian Orchestra, it's an incredibly complex kind of a thing that they do, and it was designed to be a live nation. We're going to take 5 trucks out, and we're going to have all of these lights and all of these special effects and all this stuff. We're going to write a script, and it's going to be like a Broadway play, except we're going to have these heavy metal guys playing violin and guitar solos, and great players, but it's going to be right down to the digital millisecond as that show runs, because all of the lights got to coordinate. The special effects have to happen at the right time. The chick singer's got to come out wearing the witch house outfit and doing her thing and swirling around. It's all got to happen like milliseconds. Now, the other side of it is John Fogerty. What he is still going out and singing. His guitar is still tuned in concert pitch, and he still sings the songs in the same key. I can't do that anymore. I can't. I've had to move the keys of songs down but John Fogerty still do it. Now, here's the point. Fogerty's probably doing it exactly the same way he did it when he was 18 years old, and then exactly the same when he was 25, and exactly the same when he was 45, and all through his life. And his songs never change. He counts them in and he goes, "Oh, tonight, gonna be," like whatever he's singing. "I see a bad moon horizon." It sounds exactly the same. He doesn't improvise. He doesn't, there's it's going to be John Fogerty doing, and the people that like John Fogerty, they pay their money. That's what they want. They expect it to be like locked in. John's going to be John. Now, me and you guys, we go to a show, and if it's going to be a Petrucci of Dream Theater, we want to see him push the boundaries. We want to see him challenge himself. We want to see that band interact because they're such great musicians. It's a different thing. So, this is like to each their own,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
You got to let people have what they want. And young girls want to go and see young girls singing and playing for them. Well, that's fine. I'm getting a low power mode message.
Okay.
I think.
Well, you know what? We're not gonna. Don't worry.
I don't know why that happens.
We're not gonna take too much more of your time.
All right, good.
All right, we're good for 12 more hours.
No, don't take too much more of my time.
Rick, you wrote in the book that, fans care about the artist from that point of their life, that the music meant something to them. And I mean, you've spoken about before, you've got more solo albums out there than you ever did with Triumph. Is there a little frustration that recognition, I would say would be the word, that you didn't necessarily have that on those albums as you did earlier on in your career?
Nah, I mean, over the course of time, yes, there were probably moments where I felt like I'm disappointed or I'm frustrated, and I had some bad luck. That you've got the Absolutely album behind you there. When it came out in the States, the record company went bankrupt. And it was like, well, that one just got flushed down the toilet. What are you going to do now? I got my advance for it. So it was like, well, back to the drawing board. But I think those things philosophically made it so that after a period of time, I was going, well, everybody's got to keep going back to the drawing board anyways. The older you get, the more your audience is changing. As an artist, you should be changing. The industry changed in huge ways in the 90s and when the new millennium came along. It was not a recognizable music business. It was a completely different one. And I go, well, I had my time. I'm not going to be grateful. I'm grateful for the fact that I had this thing that had happened on a big enough level that I was able to be self-indulgent for such a long period of time doing other stuff. And you go, hey, all I got to do is sell enough of them that I make enough money that I can do the next one.
That's what AC/DC did. That's what AC/DC always said. Ever was.
Yeah. It's all I ever really wanted to do from about 1995, 96 on. It was like, well, can I live to fight another day? That's all that matters, And I was taking, like I took, not to blow my own horn too much, but I think I took a few more chances than AC/DC did.
That's bad.
Just a little bit.
They were kind of, in a way, they were kind of like the John Fogerty of hard rock bands.
Yes, expect.
You knew what to expect.
Yeah, and look, nothing wrong with that. But I was a guy that went, I'm going to take chances. I'm gonna try something different. I'm gonna, the thing that I could do well was kind of switch styles, and there's not a lot of stuff that I do great, but if I do it sort of in a jazz way, and then I do it in a kind of a reggae way, and then I can make it happen. I just need slightly different settings in order to start my engines and get it going. So that it makes it so that other people go, oh my God, he's so eclectic. Oh my God, I'm not really. I only do a few things well, but I like to find different landscapes.
I love your blues playing, Rick.
Thank you.
Yeah, going back to...
in truth, that's really at the bottom of a lot of what I do. Even when I play classical pieces, I'm sometimes adhering to the idea of where did you start learning, and you learned about pentatonic, the value of pentatonic stuff. My melodies often graft pentatonic things onto chord changes, because that's what speaks to me. And I think somewhere in the book, I might have said something about, the area between the fifth and the fourth in a scale, which is the blue note. The blue note is somewhere in there, that sharp 4, flat 5 kind of thing, that's always been something that I loved to grab, like say in the key of A, you grab a D and you bend it to an E. And it's like I can tell 18 different stories with those two notes that are turning into one note, and that's the whole thing, right? B.B. King would say it, and Rory Gallagher would say it.
Rick, I think when I was learning guitar back when I was a teenager, I bought, probably was Allied Forces, the book for the music notes, for not the music, but the tablatures, right?
The tablature.
Yeah.
And I go, my God, Rick's had so many chords, so many. It's like, it wasn't AC/DC. It wasn't just like 3 power chords, right? It was like, geez, how many chords is Rick doing here? How many variations and combinations? And it was incredible. Like, it just, so much thought went into these songs that you think are a lot more simpler than they actually when you play them. I want to ask you this before we let you go. I think Gilmore told us maybe a year ago that there might be a second Triumph documentary. Have you guys actually started? Because you said there's so much archives that were still left over from the first one. Is there some possibility of?
Anything's possible,
right.
and especially
with Gilmore.
Well, yeah, and Gil really does have this thing about legacy. Like, he really does, like, I'm sort of kind of willing to let music do whatever it's going to do. And if there's some legacy that happens because of that, great, but I think Gil actively, if you're talking about documentaries, well, you need filmmakers, you need somebody that's a producer, and you need cameramen, and Gil knows this. I don't go actively trying to make those connections and find those people and talk to those people and see if they can't make a deal. And, now you got to find, like, Gil's got a thing that he's cooking now. And if you talk to him, I'm sure he'll tell you about it. He wants to take Triumph on tour.
Holographs.
Yeah.
He did. He kind of mentioned it. He said it's going to be some sort of visual experience, holographs, actors. He in the interview mentioned that. I just don't know if it's coming along. That's what I'm getting at.
He once he gets a bee in his bonnet like that, he doesn't.
He's incredible.
Focus.
He's chasing it. So, it is entirely possible. Like, I think I have said to his face, buddy, I think it's dreaming a pie in the sky kind of, that this is never gonna, I can't believe that's ever gonna happen. Good luck to you, but don't expect me to give you any time or energy. Because
I'm going to Paris.
No, you're going to be a hologram. It's okay.
I'm going to Paris.
Yeah. Well, and he says, well, Rick, would you come and allow yourself to get, little things put on you just so we can do some motion capture? I go, what, like an afternoon in a studio somewhere? He goes, yeah. I go, okay, no, I would do that. Sure.
Good.
But I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I think
I think it's going to happen. I think he's determined. He's got his eyes. He's focused.
I know. But there's been things like Kiss did a thing where they were going to be in the Sphere in Vegas, and I don't think it happened. I think in the end it was like, oh, we're biting off more than we can chew. And ABBA did a thing where they were and it was going to be, people will go to watch this show, and it was like, it didn't run very long. I'm not sure that it's something that is going to excite people. I think they really want to see the real thing, and they want to know what we were talking about before, that there's a high wire and somebody's walking on it, and oh my God, they could fall. Yeah. Maybe they're going to do an incredible thing. Maybe they're going to fall. Like, I think that's a thing that music live has to have, that in order to really be something that'll capture the people's imagination. But what do I know?
Before we go, I just wanted Janine Leach, who did the illustrations in the book, fantastic job. They're really well done.
Indeed, and
beautiful. Yes,
that cover that the book's got, like ECW Press was going to do their own cover the way they would normally do it.
Let me see, like this, maybe.
One night, and she said, I've got this idea. Can I send it to you? I think I've got an idea for the cover. And she sent me that. And there's an illustration inside for there was a chapter called Woodsheds and something in Woodsheds. Anyways, she did that illustration first. And I went, oh my God, this is incredible. She said, I think I got an idea for the cover. So I said, hey, if you send it to me, I'll pitch it to ECW. And everybody, when they saw it, went, this is great. This is unbelievable. So, yes, it was great. And I think for her, it was sort of a realization of something she kind of wanted and hoped to be able to do all her life, like illustrations for a book, people that do that kind of thing, like work in design, and she's a photographer, and like she always hoped she'd get a chance to do it. And she got paid well for her for her efforts. But
we should say it's March 25th. We didn't mention that. March 25th it's being released. The 10 Telecaster Tales. Here's a quick little question. Just answer quickly.
Okay.
How many times a week do you get asked, is there going to be a Triumph reunion?
Well, I mean, this week I'm doing interviews for the book. And so I'm going to get asked, how many interviews have I got? 11, 12,
Well, when you walk to the grocery store, when you interact with people.
But you're only gonna get paid for 10.
Just hide.
Yeah, no, I get asked in almost every interview, but casually when I see folks, no, that it doesn't really happen that often because, well, first of all, look at my haircut. Yeah, like look at the way that I look. I don't get recognized anymore.
Sure you do. You look the same. You got the same.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying. It's like I can pretty much function with anonymity in public now, so that doesn't really happen very often. And I'm not the kind of guy that makes a big deal of himself either. It's not like I put on rock star clothes to go to the grocery store, to go to the beer store,
like those red satin pants, get them out of storage there.
Walk into the store with a double neck guitar.
I'm here. Have you guys ever heard the story of the time Triumph was walking down in Chicago O'Hare Airport? We're walking down one of those, gigantic long where all the gates are and the thing. And here comes the Van Halen entourage going the other way. And as they come, you realize they've got a couple of like small people, little people, midgets that are carrying guitar cases. They got chicks and girls, and one girl's wearing a bikini top. And David Lee Roth is out in front, and he's got a giant feather boa around his neck that's like 8-10 feet long, trailing along behind him in giant snakeskin platform boots. And he's just walking down and it's like, well, they're making a big deal of themselves. No one's going to not know that Van Halen came walking up the thing. Meanwhile, Triumph, we're walking the other way. Nobody gives a shit who we are.
The US Festival. There's like a whole video on Van Halen at the US Festival. They had like a city they built or a town that they built with tents. And I'm sure you didn't see that.
No, it was a fort. It was right behind, like there was an area that was a compound for all the acts with their trailers. And then there was a river, like a little river. And there was an island that had this, it looked like something out of Lord of the Flies, like giant wooden palisade all the way around you had to get past security to get to where the Van Halen compound was. They had their own special compound. And you went, okay, wild. Like you knew you were in California because there were set builders that built, the Van Halen compound.
Amazing.
Yeah, true.
Rick,
okay.
The health's good, and look, you're looking good. And thanks for the book, and have a great trip. And great talking to you as always.
So you guys. All right.
March 25th. Have a nice night.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.